Hello, I'm Katherine O'Fallon, the Executive Director of the Marine Research Hub, leading efforts to advance ocean solutions and innovation in Florida and beyond. By 2030, the global ocean economy is projected to reach $3 trillion and 40 million jobs. And Florida, surrounded by water, is uniquely positioned to lead the way with marine solutions with a global impact. At the Marine Research Hub, we connect stakeholders, elevate oceanographic research, and commercialize marketable solutions that drive investment opportunities, create sustainable jobs, and ultimately protect our marine and coastal environments. Founded in 2017, the Marine Research Hub bridges the gap between scientific discovery and real-world application. Through collaboration between researchers, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and industry leaders, we accelerate commercialization, investment, and ecosystem building, creating lasting impact for our oceans and coastal communities. We are just beginning to make waves, and the potential is limitless. Join us as we fuel the blue economy through innovation, sustainability, and strategic investment, from Florida to the entire world. Welcome to another episode of the Blue Economy Podcast. I'm your host, Katherine O'Fallon, the Executive Director of the Marine Research Hub. And I'm really excited today because I'm sitting down with two of my favorite people, and it's not because they're my bosses or anything like that. I actually really enjoy, and I'm really excited that we're going to be able to have this time to share with you a little bit about the Marine Research Hub. So love to introduce my guests. Today, I have Bob Swindell, President and CEO of the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance, which is the economic development engine for the Greater Fort Lauderdale region, who is also the president of the Marine Research Hub board. So welcome, Bob. I'm so glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Kate. Glad to be here.
Thanks. And then sitting right next to him is Phil Purcell, the CEO and president of the Marine Industries Association of South Florida, owners of the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show, largest in-water boat show in the world. And you can see where we're sitting. You see some of the yachts behind us. This is actually one of the sites of the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show, the Las Olas Marina, brand new construction, just finished this year. So we'll talk about where we're at. It's beautiful. And Phil happens to also be the vice president of the Marine Research Hub board. So thanks for joining me, Phil.
Thanks, Kate, for having us. Really appreciate it.
I'm so glad you guys are here because we've been trying to get sitting down and talking about, the start of the hub, and both of you in this space are the reason I'm sitting in this chair, partially, very much a huge part of it. And we're here today on a absolutely gorgeous day. I mean, if those of you who are seeing behind us think that this is a green screen, it's not. We're really here. It's just a perfect day in Fort Lauderdale. It's a little cool. But I think this is why we live.
Perfect weather.
This is why we live here in this place. This is the time of the year where we can actually sit outside and be sitting in the sun and not worry about melting.
That timestamp, it's January 24th, 1:45. So you folks, wherever you're watching this from, this is as good as it gets in Fort Lauderdale.
FYI, it's February 24th.
Oh, it is February.
What did I say?
January, I think you said January. That's okay. February.
See, you lose track of time being here. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. It's actually normally this cooler in January, but it is a little cooler this February. And it is February 24th. So here, this is why we live where we are at. We love this time of the year because we can sit outside and, like I said, not melt. But let's talk about, we are sitting in this great place, which is the site of one of the locations for the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show, FLIBS, as we like to affectionately call it. Largest in-water boat show in the world. It brings millions of economic impact to our industry, to our community. But this was kind of, not this exact location, but FLIBS was the idea or the start of the idea of the Marine Research Hub. So tell me how that started. Everyone's, we like to tell the story in the shorter version, but let's actually really hear what happened. How did it start?
I'll kick it off. The real idea person behind this will need to speak up. But, the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show, as Kate said, the largest boat show in the world. But what a phenomenal hosting opportunity. So one of the responsibilities of the Economic Development Organization is to introduce businesses to South Florida and Fort Lauderdale and the surrounding area and share with them why this is such a great location for business. Today is an example of part of why people are attracted to South Florida, especially when our friends in the Northeast are socked in with snow right now. But the boat show is a great opportunity for hosting. I mean, there are communities, I've got counterparts across the country that would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to have the individuals that are coming to visit for the boat show come here and visit. And they come here voluntarily because they want to be a part of this boat show. Incredible what's going on in the yachting business. And We're really proud of the fact that we are the yachting boating capital of the world in South Florida and Fort Lauderdale. When I came to the Alliance, we were not really utilizing the boat show as a hosting experience, right? So Phil and I, we came on much around the same time, not too far apart, and was talking to him about, well, we really should think about how we can build more opportunities to host businesses and talk to folks about, if you're coming here to look at yachts, and you love the boating environment, why not have your business here as well? Then you can spend year-round time in South Florida. So after one of the boat shows, we started doing a global business lunch that you guys host for us very generously. We've been doing that for over a decade.
Yeah.
But it was not unusual for Phil and I to get together for a beer after the boat show a couple of weeks later and just do a little decompress. How was the show? What went really well? What are we going to change for next year? And in that conversation, Phil mentioned, he's, Bob, I've been in this business almost my entire life. I've traveled all over the world. And I'm just surprised that we don't have a better reputation for oceanographic research in South Florida. He said, I think we're one of the top places in the country for oceanographic research. And, I thought that was an interesting idea and topic, and ordered another beer. And a couple of weeks later, I ran into Phil, and Phil's like, so what'd you think about my idea? I'm like, oh, you really want to pursue this, right? He's like, yeah, I think we can raise the reputation of oceanographic research. He said, think of it. We've got 4 research universities, 2 public, 2 private, that have oceanographic campuses. They're doing amazing work in this area. We really need to build the reputation for that excellence. And that was sort of the impetus for it.
Yeah, to Bob's point, so, when you think of FLIBS and things like that, so it's the biggest in-water boat show in the world. It delivers an economic benefit to the state of Florida of $1.8 billion. And over, a 5-day period, over $825 million will, change hands. So that's direct sales. So, it's about $164 million a day. So with that comes the Sergey Brims, the Eric Schmidts, the Larry Pages, the Tillman Fertittas, and the names go on, of entrepreneurs that, that come into this town. And the oceanographic, as Bob said, here we live on the 3rd largest barrier reef in the world. And yet, if we brought it up to our children in the schools here or anyone else, they would have told you, and they probably even to this day, they'd say, oh, that's in Australia. No, it's right here. And it goes from Stewart all the way to the Keys, and it protects our coastline and stuff. And then the oceanographic, my thing was, sharks and skates weren't prone to cancer. Why is that? Why don't they get cancer? Why can you pull an arm off a starfish and to regenerate? And yet its DNA is one of the closest things, I think, to our body, if I'm not mistaken, someone told me. And so all those little things. Then we have these wonderful, oceanographic universities right at the mouth of our port and things like that. So it's been a great collaboration to get all these things off the ground, whether it was the business luncheon and then ultimately the Marine Research Hub.
Yeah, and you guys, the Marine Research Hub, really was started in 2017, really was where you brought everyone together. You said, we got these 4 institutions, but you guys brought all the presidents of every single university, Florida Atlantic University, Nova Southeastern University, Florida International University, and University of Miami. All the presidents, and to your credit, Bob, you also brought all the EDOs from South Florida. So this wasn't just an alliance thing. This was bringing in the Beacon Council and the Board of Development of Palm Beach. Why was it so important to bring all of the entities together?
Well, South Florida is surrounded by water, right? And I really think we are building the future of marine science right here in South Florida. So I think from the very beginning, we really felt that it needed to be a regional effort. Our 4 universities cover multiple counties. FAU is fortunate to have 2 oceanographic campuses, Harbor Branch up in the Fort Pierce area, and then in Dania Beach, we've got the SeaTech Center. They focus on a little bit different research in each of those facilities, but it really needed to be across the board, 4 research universities, which is impressive in itself. But when you look at their, the campuses they have that focus on oceanographic sciences, it's pretty amazing, right? The work that's being done. I remember talking to a researcher at FAU up at Harbor Branch, and they had discovered that poisonous sea snails, some of the poisonous sea snails, their venom had a phenomenal pain analgesic without any of the addictive challenges of opioids or anything else. And so you think about that. So how do you synthesize snail venom in the lab? But that's the kind of, brand new research that's being done, this cutting edge stuff that, is really delving into the depths of medicines from the sea. And whether it's the corals and cancer or sharks and cancer, there's so many opportunities. And, that work is being done here. For economic development, selfishly, I want to build the reputation of Fort Lauderdale and South Florida. We're known as a great, vacation
destination, but
great place to come have fun, play.
Yep.
But you don't have to just be here part-time, right?
You can be here all the time.
There's a growing workforce here. I've watched Fort Lauderdale mature. I like to say now we have a casual sophistication to Fort Lauderdale, because as a kid growing up, we didn't have a lot of cultural amenities, and that's all changed. We've got 3 performing arts centers in South Florida that bring in the top shows from across the country into our communities. But we've really matured as a community, and building up the reputation for that competence and who's here, I think is critically important. And marine research is just one of those components.
Yeah.
To Bob's point, so when you think like FAU, and I'm not singling out one, but you think of spinoffs that happen. So FAU was real big on submersibles and things like that. And out of that was a gentleman that we're all familiar with, Patrick Leahy, Triton Subs. So when they were scaling back on the submersibles way back when, Patrick had all these ideas in his head, right? Which became Triton Subs, but he hired a lot of the researchers from FAU. And now Triton Subs, when you look at that's, a dominant sub company that's safe, certified around the globe, not like the one that had the accident.
The deepest depths of the ocean.
The deepest depths of the ocean. But they're also, they found the giant squid. Nobody had seen it before, They're finding and naming species. And then if you look at the partnerships that have come in, it came from the yachting community. So, the first person was Chris Klein, who did a boat called Mind Games at Trinity. But what allowed it, he took a chance on Patrick. That was the first sub that he sold. And that was a sub, I think it was 2,000 to 3,000 feet, the depth that it could attain. And since then, now you look at all the major yachts in the world, his subs are on it. And then you look at his partners, Ray DeLeo, James Cameron, really smart people that have become his business partners also. But they have been active with Ray owning OceanX, also him and his son, Mark.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to go back and watch, Patrick was one of our guests on I think it was my second episode of the Blue Economy podcast. So he was great to have him on. So you can go back and watch that episode. But the investment side is what you're getting at, Phil.
So one of the things, it was funny. So when you go back with the hub too, and I'm sure Bob will remember. So Kelly Skidmore, right, sat in that seat and has been very instrumental from the background now that she's a state legislator, helping push through things that create funding and awareness for the hub also on the state level. That said, we would send her on missions. And one of the missions was to the Nantucket Project. And she came back and she learned about DNA. 23andMe was up there and she did her own DNA testing and she found out a lot of interesting things.
I'm waiting for that movie. It's a movie.
I'm waiting for that movie. And all positive things, but I'm still waiting for that movie. That said, the other thing was she went to Savannah and uncovered Ocean Exchange. And Ocean Exchange was, in a flux period back then in terms of had one award, $100,000 prize. They had lost one and it needed to make a change. And so by creating that awareness, we worked together to offer up an additional $100,000 prize and then help them relocate to South Florida, which was a really big milestone in the awareness of the hub and for Ocean Exchange also.
Yeah, and the awareness of what's going on in South Florida, because now Ocean Exchange has grown since it relocated in 2019. And last year, 2025, we gave away 3 $100,000 award prizes for early stage investable solution companies from all over the world, and then 3 $10,000 collegiate awards. So that definitely has grown. And it's bringing solutions to our backyard, solutions that we've recognized that we need here.
Right.
We need coastal infrastructure solutions for resilience. We talk about this a lot where we're living and the impacts that we're feeling on the coast. Everyone's feeling it, but we're kind of at ground zero for a lot of the things that are happening, not only with resilience and coastal protection. Phil, you mentioned the reef track, which is, impacts of heat and temperature increase have decimated our reefs, but there's a lot of research that's happening right here in our backyard. And so we kind of think of South Florida as, the heart of where things are happening, but also the opportunity for the biggest solutions can come out of our region.
Well, that's where that collaboration comes in again. A project that Bob can talk dearly about, is the port project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as it expands and stuff, it's going to need, how many corals now? 2 billion or something like that?
They haven't landed on the exact number yet.
2 billion corals. But whatever it needs, the good news is it has to be raised here in the U.S. And so through Ocean Exchange, we've met these companies that have scalable opportunities to help the universities, which not one can handle on its own, right? And that's that collaborative nature of this whole community down here, from Palm Beach South of how do we keep that stake in the ground and lead this country and lead this world on solutions.
Yeah, and solutions that are, like we said, tackling our greatest challenges, but also you mentioned earlier, Bob, workforce and the talent pipeline. I mean, what better place to, if you're tackling these challenges, have solutions that we need, but you also can get your talent and your workforce right from your backyard.
Well, you think about, tapping into students, right? If you want to study oceanography, Florida's going to be one of the best destinations, especially South Florida, right? So part of this is building that reputation. But when you think about, the amazing work that's being done here, it's part of the reason it's a regional effort was we wanted to pull across, all 4 universities, but also a foundational value of Marine Research Hub was we spent the first year learning, right? Kelly went out and we encouraged her, travel, go to San Diego, go to other parts of the country, see what's being done. We didn't want to replicate what was already being done. We wanted to look at examples of what was successful and could we put a South Florida twist on it? And then something like Oceans Exchange, we meet, the folks that are involved with that, and they were ready to go to a new community. Tie it in with our boat show. We look at philanthropy. If you're investing in a yacht, you want to have it floating on a healthy ocean, right? So there's a natural connection there. And talking to the Ocean Exchange folks about, Fort Lauderdale's a bigger market. We've got this amazing boat show. Why not figure out a way to make you guys a part of that? And that was where we didn't reinvent that, right? We worked with them, we made it better and I think bigger. And we want to continue to do that, right? Oceans Exchange has become part of the story that we'd love to tell. And it's about new discoveries. I mean, I'm amazed at some of the founders that I've met that they've applied and some have won awards. Nick Flanders is amazing. I mean, some of the other companies and technology, whether it's battery technology, it's across the board. A sensor technology. And it's great that we've got a platform like Ocean Exchange that's helping to tell that story for those innovators.
Yeah, and bring everybody together. Like you said, it's all about that collaboration, and awareness and exposure is such a huge part, because I always say we don't know what we don't know, but it's the investment side that you brought up with the people who are now putting money into it, like Ray and Mark DeLeo, who have now Ocean X. I mean, that wasn't around 10 years ago. But there's a lot of more people are seeing that opportunity to invest, not just do good for the environment anymore. You can make money and do good for the environment at the same time. And so I want to early years, started off, Kelly Skidmore, amazing. She's representative now at the state level, has really been pushing through a lot of things. I came on board thanks to Representative Chip LaMarca, who have helped get some appropriations. And we've really, thankfully, with all of your support, we've been able to really grow. What do you see in the future of what the hub can do and on our region as a whole? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think,
go ahead.
Part of what's been missing, and this is Kate, where you're such a phenomenal, operator within the sphere, is connecting people, connecting ideas. You've got a great memory, and when you meet a new company that's working on a new innovation or a new technology, you've known somebody else that you've talked to over the last couple of years and say, well, you should talk to this person, right? And it may not be a direct connection, but there's usually degrees. That person will say, well, that's not exactly the research we're doing, but I know someone who can help with that. So I think, connecting that, because ultimately commercialization, great ideas are fine, but if they die in the lab and they don't make it to either where they can be, prescribed out to patients that really need pain relief or cancer treatment, or we have these other technologies that don't make it out of the workbench. That's the challenge, right? So it's finding that early capital and connecting people with not only the innovation, but building teams, right? It's investors don't invest in just an idea or a technology. They invest in a team that can take that to market. So a big part of it is how do we build that ecosystem in South Florida where we've got a hub,
literally,
but we can build on it with partners like NSU, with not only the corals are growing at their oceanographic facility, but their Center of Innovation, Levan Center of Innovation out in Davie. There's all kinds of different components that we can pull in, and that's where I think the hub and spoke network works really well here.
Yeah, again, to Bob's point, the relationship capital that we all have in our phones is second to none. And so how do we monetize that, right? And so it's just bringing people to the table. The board that's been assembled around you is a who's who board in terms of entrepreneurs and people that have made things happen in the community, nationally, internationally, and a lot of different ideas. So now when we take that and scale it to the opportunities that exist with Ocean Exchange, with the Marine Research Hub and the universities as our partners, it can go, you look at UF, they're probably the most successful at scaling things, right, and monetizing things. So that should be a model that we should all be a part and want to see succeed here. And so, what's the old saying? Analysis through paralysis through analysis, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's the big thing that the hub's doing, which is no one has to be right for it to be wrong. But if we take this path and let the College of Pharmacology talk to the business college, then we're going to get to the solutions that we need. And that's something I think we're really good at.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that is the thing, is connectivity, collaboration, connectivity. And then, like you said, everyone knows somebody.
Right.
It's, and it
6 degrees of separation.
Right? What is it? The Kevin Bacon thing, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of the same. 6-7 degrees of separation. So what do we? We're bringing on more partners into the space. It's not just we're adding on universities. We've just partnered with St. Thomas University is adding on. We're having conversations with UF, and now we're expanding outside of South Florida into the state of Florida. So we're bringing on university partners. We're bringing on business partners. Why should the business community care about the Marine Research Hub? Why is it important for them if you're not directly connected to the marine space, but you're maybe indirectly? Why should we encourage them to be a part of it?
If you were in Silicon Valley and were in the business community, right, you'd be really pushing Silicon Valley and all the the inventiveness and things that are happening there. Washington, again, has that entrepreneurial culture. Seattle, places like that. So Boston has its thing, same thing. So we have all the recipe. We have all the raw materials here. We just need to assemble it. And that's where the hub, and that's what you're doing, is creating the awareness and the opportunity for everyone. Because again, this little pier called Florida that, juts off North America, it's, 90 miles from the Bahamas, from Havana. Bahamas is less, and then the Caribbean as a whole.
Oh.
So all the problems that are pushing on the world and leaning heavily, if we believe the New York Times, we're all going to be underwater next week, right? And that's not true, right? And so we already know it's not true. But in the meantime, you have to come up with solutions, right? And that's where I think this hub really is able to scale on a national level and maybe create more hubs also.
Yeah. Well, it's not about, we know there's challenges, we know there's problems, but we can't just keep talking about them. We have to look at adaptation, and solutions are the way to go. Like we still need data. Data drives a lot of our decisions, but we need to start putting things in place to tackle all these challenges. And that's where the hub and the university research and commercialization all come into play. So anything else from the business side?
From a business perspective, part of, I think, in Broward County alone, I think it's a $30 billion investment over the next couple of decades to prepare ourselves for sea level rise. So as basic as higher seawalls, but there's a lot of other raising roads. There's a lot of components
stormwater pumping systems because of the rain. It's not just the sea level rise, but the rain inundation and where water can go.
And we're so used to being, a gravity system, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that as sea levels rise, a gravity-based system is no longer going to work. So we've got to think of different designs and better designs. So whether it's creating seawalls that are more adaptable to sea life, which makes perfect sense when you think about it, using different type of technologies to break up ocean activity. So you preserve your beaches without having maybe do an expensive renourishment of a beach. You can use other devices to help break up that wave action. Using wave action, we are the closest to the Gulf Stream of anywhere else in the country. So when you think that Gulf Stream, it's a constant stream of water that comes by Florida. Mm-hmm. How do we tap into that, right? It's, it rises and falls from the speed over the course of the year, but it's always moving past our state.
Yep.
And there's no closer place to access it than South Florida. So, those types of things are part of what we're going to have to look at. But it goes back to, if we want to be able to have insurance for our homes and for our businesses on the bricks and mortar, if insurance providers are not comfortable and not confident that you're going to be able to make your community resilient, insurance is going to be more and more expensive, and we're seeing it. And then if it doesn't become even available, how do you finance property and projects? So it's really important. And I think that's where the business community started beginning to understand, because resiliency, for a lot of folks, it was a philosophical, or it was more of a philosophical discussion than what we're dealing with. And even further
down the line, too, people didn't really think it was, why should we be worrying about what's going to happen in 50 years? But we have to build the infrastructure for the 50-year mark.
And we see the king tides here, right? So we see an example of it, especially in the fall, where, we've got, we see some flooding in the area, and then you add in rain. It really brings people home. It's like, well, these are issues we have to deal with today. And it's just not coastal. I mean, you go out to areas like Sawgrass Mills Mall and you see flooding out there where their whole parking lots could be flooded, right? So it's just not an East Coast thing. It's throughout the South Florida region. So we've got to learn, how do we tap into the Everglades? How do we make sure that we don't put polluted waters into our waterway system, into Florida Bay? You know, and there's technologies where they're extracting some of these phosphates from the water. And it's like, how do we invest in these companies? Because there's clearly a need for it. But again, how do we commercialize and help tell the story of why this technology is important?
No, and that's where we become that test bed for all these companies that pass through Ocean Exchange and others. You know, so how do you harden your infrastructure without terrifying everyone, but incorporate it into the build at the end of the day? So like the socks for phosphates and things like that. There's a company, I
Water
believe it's
Warriors.
there you go, out of Kentucky, I believe, right?
Yep. We're actually doing some chatting with them to introduce them and about 8 other companies to city, municipality, and county staff members across the South Florida region to see if there's any potential for pilots, for test beds, for maybe collaboration on grant opportunities. It's about making those connections that can move the needle.
It's kind of like Sway, right? With with using algae to make
alternative plastics
packaging and stuff. So that way, unfortunately, we still see litter on the side of the roads. But if people litter that, it's biodegradable, I think, in 30 days, something like that.
Yeah, it's in a home composting system. And then, you guys just met last year up from UF. Last year, one of the $10,000 Collegiate Award winners was Ignition Packaging, basically taking bio waste from the farms, the sugarcane farms and everything, and making it into alternative styrofoam packaging. Brand new idea that's coming out. And he's, gonna take the world by storm, I think, a little bit like Nicholas did from 12 in capturing the carbon and now using it as alternative fuel sources for jet fuel and even hopefully into marine fuel.
Well, again, without the hub, those things wouldn't have happened. So wouldn't have brought Ocean Exchange here, wouldn't they could stay here and then add on, so it's like adding an additional prize right now. That's an important thing. Add another $100,000 prize. That's more centric of some of our needs. Maybe it could be water quality issues, things like that.
Yep.
But again, that's that solution. That's where the business community comes in. It doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen by chance. People need to get involved. And they need to put, with the old saying, the money where their mouth is.
And support all of the work we're doing. And we have really brought on, Broward County is a partner with us. Port Everglades is a partner with us. We've got businesses from water filtration like Alini Water, D'Angelo Marine Exhaust, Total Marine Solution in the direct marine place, but even starting to have conversations with people who aren't directly philanthropic. People are starting to invest in support because they want to see this growth of solutions.
Well, and that's where I think the Marine Research Hub is a unique, place in this whole conversation, right? Because working with economic development organizations, we've got close ties to economic development, but also government and policymakers. I'm really proud of the city of Fort Lauderdale. They're going through a process right now to make, if you're going to request a permit for a seawall, a living seawall, Kind Design is one of the companies that we've worked with in the past. But they want to not only discount the permit, but expedite the approval process for residents in Fort Lauderdale that want to install one of these living seawalls. Sometimes it takes, through a permitting process, government tends to be the slowest to change. Like, who wants to be on the leading edge of a new seawall that may have some problems that someone didn't foresee? So the safe bet is we'll let somebody else take the lead on it and we'll follow. And I'm really proud of Fort Lauderdale and that they want to be out in front and say, we want to embrace these new technologies from a governmental standpoint and encourage, families that there's a bit of a premium you have to pay for a living seawall. We're going to try to offset that with some of the permitting costs, but more importantly, even get you your permit more quickly and faster on the turnaround time. So I think, those types of things are important, and we get one city in Broward County to do that. We hope that others will follow.
Yeah, someone has to take the lead. And I think South Florida is starting to realize we're at a very critical opportunity point to say we can take the lead. We can be the one who is, with all of the support of our community, from the government entities doing their part, to the business community bringing in their part, to the universities, and to just the entire community really putting their support, whatever resource support that is, behind some of the initiatives. So I agree with you. City of Hollywood's been doing a lot. You see Pompano doing a number of things, and even going out west, like you said, it's not just the coastal communities that are impacted, and more people are coming to the table for these conversations.
Well, Florida is the 3rd largest state in the nation. We're the 6th largest metropolitan area behind, LA, Chicago, New York, Houston, Dallas, and then us. So the infrastructure needs are vast. But the nice thing is you're seeing people move in a much quicker timeline to get these things implemented and in place so that the community can benefit from it. And again, it gets back to the hub again. It's at the center of connecting all these dots.
Well, and if we can deploy, pilot, test all the solutions here, the global impact is immense. You know, it comes from here, raised here, but everybody needs it. It's not just us that is feeling the coastal impacts, or even when it comes down to food supply and aquaculture solutions and different things like that, water quality, everyone's dealing with it on different scales. So as we're kind of wrapping up here on our time soon, because I love having the chance to talk to both of you all the time. It is getting warm out here, but you can see why. I think, you know, you guys are such experts in this.
Sorry, Washington. Sorry, Connecticut. Sorry.
Gotta take off our jackets. You guys can see why I love sitting down with you guys. And why, I mean, the depth of knowledge that you guys both have, that you can keep all of this in your brain, the little nuggets that I, you know, sometimes share with you or that you hear from everybody else is just great to see your vision. And you guys were at, you know, like I said, we're at the moment. Everyone's starting to have these conversations. People are putting their, but 10 years ago, you guys were having this conversation. What does it feel like now, looking back on that first conversation and now where we're at with Marine Research Hub? What comes to mind when you think about that? Phil, what about you?
What comes to mind is that we can attract quality people like you and retain them in this community, and that are so engaged and become that voice for everyone else that was part of what we saw. You know, who's going to be that voice? Who's going to lead this thing over time? And you're that person. And that's made a huge difference, you know, because again, you're like Switzerland, which is really important in this whole thing, that it's Switzerland. The universities are doing tremendous things, but unfortunately, everyone wants to be centric to the university. It's kind of like a team, right? You know, Americans just won the hockey game, right?
USA.
Great thing, right?
Both men's and women.
Men's and women. Fantastic.
30 years ago, or 46 years ago today, they won the gold. Yeah. I know, because I was born today.
Amazing.
Matthew Tkachuk was on the Team USA for the Panthers.
Yeah,
very proud of him.
was on the Panthers. And
with his brother Brady.
Who was on, Marchand was on the Canadian side, so either way.
Look how cool. We had a couple guys on the Canadian team,
yes,
too.
I think
but it's all those things. And if you look, you know, cities that win Super Bowls, cities that win, you know, NBA titles, you look at what happens around that in hockey titles. Yeah. The whole community rallies around that winning thing. Well, this is a thing that we're winning at, equally important, creates a lot of opportunity on the job market. So when I see the jobs being created and how it benefits our community, and then the ideas that are coming out of here, like no other place. You think about it. In the whole Southeast, there's no other place that an event takes place like this. And that's all happening here. That makes us very proud.
And you always like to say, Phil, that we have an annual Super Bowl with the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show.
Without question. We get 100,000 people from 90 plus countries.
We can get rallying behind that every single year for economic impact. And it's a win every single year for us.
And as you look at all those boats here, there's an expectation that there's something on that reef, that the water's clean. And that's why they come here. I mean, it's the hub. It's the yachting capital of the world. But those entrepreneurs, that's why this shouldering the Fort Lauderdale show, we can do more. We just need to integrate it even more.
Yeah. What about you, Bob, looking back?
So for me, I was up in New York with my counterparts from Kelly Smallridge from Palm Beach and Rod Miller from Miami-Dade. We had been spent a couple of days just talking to New York businesses about, you know, a lot of them already have locations in South Florida. But we also met with some venture capitalists while we were up there. And a common theme that I heard, them telling me, which was so nice because we talked about building the reputation as a part of this when we started 10 years ago, but them telling me, you guys should own blue ocean economy research. You know, you guys have got the infrastructure. You're Florida. You can't recreate your ecosystem anywhere else in the country. You guys should be ground zero for innovations and how we're going to approach, you know, changing environment and how do we prepare for rising seas, then harden our systems and really think about resilience and what that looks like. So when I have folks telling me that when I travel, especially to New York City, and it's venture capital, it's angel investors that really think that we are the bedrock for that. So that tells me there's going to be deal flow here.
Yep.
Deal flow brings more of those individuals down. When they hear about something that, you know, like Ocean Exchange, that's a tangible example of, you know, the thought leadership that's happening right here in South Florida. And it's nice to hear when others are telling us the message we've been trying to share for the last decade.
Well, the nice thing about it, too, is as they become successful and these companies spin off and ramp up, they become boat buyers.
Yep. And then they feed back into the
They
system.
come back into the circle.
And that's the thing is some people are, always the comments sometimes are like, we don't have the investment like Silicon Valley does, but we're still early in the blue economy phase. Like no one's really exited a blue economy solution yet. So we have to build this infrastructure and this ecosystem. And the way that we're doing that is through collaboration and connectivity and not reinventing the wheel again. That's always been a big theme from the moment I joined on, was that there's no reason to create something that's already there. We just need to help elevate, connect. And I always like to say, get out of the way so things can get done.
Build good relationships and do what you say.
Yep.
That's the key.
Well, I always enjoy chatting with you guys, but this has been really nice sitting out here. I'm sorry, Phil, that got a little warm for you, but you're wearing a black jacket. I wore a white one today, As we're kind of wrapping up, is there any final thoughts, final one comment, sentence that you want to leave our listeners and viewers with today?
For me, it would be, marine research is about a lot more than just discovery. It's about economic growth. It's about resilience. It's about building resilient communities. And I think people hopefully will understand that after they spend more time with the Marine Research Hub. And your podcast has been a great way to share that message.
Oh, well, thank you. That was also another beautiful idea that's come out. We're on number 11 today. And so we're almost 12 episodes in and just keeps growing. So
I guess my takeaway, everything that Bob said, in addition to get involved.
Yeah.
So, the nice thing is get involved. What we're doing is going to change the way South Florida feels over the next 50 years. And you can be part of those solutions or you can be part of the problem. You can get in the corner in a fetal position and say, I'm not going to do anything. Or you can get, you don't have to write a check. You can get involved in a lot of other ways. But what is happening here is really remarkable. So thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Yeah. Everyone has different assets and resources that they can supply to this community. As if you're a former entrepreneur, you can become a mentor for a lot of these startups. You can be a lot of what we see with the new startups, especially coming from the scientific spectrum of things, is that they don't always know the business side of things. They don't know how to navigate it. And then there's a lot of pitfalls. And so if we can bring some of those resources into this community, make those connections from the business college to the, the science, engineering, tech, pharmaceutical side, we can really help, those ideas leave the lab and not stay, kind of in the shadows or on the shelf and things like that. So thank you both again. I'm so glad that this ended up being a beautiful day. I couldn't have asked for a better day. For those of you who are joining us again, thank you. Continue to follow the Blue Economy Podcast and check us out on our website. And we hope to see you again next time. Thank you for joining us. I'm glad we got to share a little bit about the history and vision behind the Marine Research Hub, and we hope to see you again next time. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.
If your brand belongs in the heart of the yachting world, this is where it happens. Yachting International Radio reaches over 1 million yachting professionals and enthusiasts every month, with 77 million impressions, 220,000 social followers, and 74,000 podcast subscribers. Our hosts are insiders, crew, captains, CEOs, trusted voices shaping the industry. This is targeted, high-impact advertising in a luxury niche. Visit yachtinginternationalradio.com/advertise. Your audience is already listening.